Well, hello, listeners, and welcome to Connecting the Dots with DelRo. I am your lovely host, Dillon Del Rosso, aka DelRo, and I am here to help showcase the power of networking, both professionally and personally. On this podcast, myself and my incredible guests will share our stories on how the art of connecting has shaped our lives and careers. We'll share our successes, failures, embarrassments, tips and tricks, once-in-a-lifetime opportunities, and much more. What I'm getting at here is we're all here to connect with each other genuinely. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Well, listen, you'll be hearing plenty of me, so let's get to it. Welcome to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Connecting the Dots with DelRo. Today on episode 6, I'm joined by the founder and CEO of Green Lane Communications, Mike Mejer. Mike, how are you, my friend? Glad to have you on the show.
Dillon, thank you so much. Same here, man. I'm super excited about it. I'm glad we finally have the time to just catch up and do one of these episodes, man, because it's been a long time coming.
Yeah, you're not kidding. It's funny. When we first hopped on the Zoom here a few minutes ago, I was like, Mike, I think this is the first time I'm seeing you face to face.
Yeah.
Although, we've probably connected more than a handful of times over the last year. It's no secret we're living in this Zoom bubble, right? And so it's good to have you on the show. I'm so excited we can finally find the time to connect. And that only speaks to how busy you've been and how busy the cannabis industry has been. For a little background, Green Lane Communications is a cannabis-focused PR agency that Mike founded and is the CEO of, and he's just been absolutely crushing it. And I couldn't be more excited to help share your story and a lot of the things that you have going on. So why don't we do this, Mike? Tell our listeners a bit more about who you are and, start us from the beginning, man, both personally, professionally. Let us in a little bit.
Yeah, no, I mean, first and foremost, thank you for that kind intro. I appreciate it, man. And I'm super happy to see both of us, making the most of the situation that the world is in right now and just kind of moving forward with it. So just super happy about that. But I mean, kind of where all of this started was, I would say back in 2011, 2012, when I first got started in public relations and media relations, but I was working in the book publishing space and I was working with nonfiction business book authors. So typically they were C-suite executives, founders, owners, faces of companies. And they would put out a book, but not necessarily with the intention to sell millions of copies and make money that way, right? It was more so of a brand equity play, high ticket calling card type of thing. And right around that time was when, or at least this became apparent to me, it was very popular to build out a second stream of revenue and commission, 5-6 figures for getting up on stage in front of a big, Fortune 500 company, get on stage for 60 minutes, do your thing, and then walk out and boom, you got 5 to 6 figures. So that was a big thing in the world for thought leaders, subject matter experts, especially when they had credibility and credentials and a solid track record. So they would do the book. The firm that I was working with at the time, we would do the publicity on the book, get them into places like Forbes, Inc., Fast Company, all the big B2B players. Then the authors would then just roll up those media assets and incorporate that into their sales and marketing material. They would then use that to go bust down the door, get those speaking engagements. And that's kind of how we plugged in, right? So that was awesome. And it was kind of like a treat for me because I'm a self-help personal growth junkie. So when I got to immerse myself into all these books and connect with all these authors, I was like, wait, I have to take this home and read this book later. Like, oh, this is such heavy lifting. So that was cool. I had a blast, but then I was just kind of like, okay, self-publishing came around and then it wasn't necessarily as difficult to publish a book if you didn't have the credentials behind it. As long as you just had 20, 30K, you could easily just publish a book and call yourself a quote unquote expert and a guru.
I didn't realize
and
that.
so those waters started to get,
I didn't realize that.
I mean, even today, it's really not difficult to do. And I'm not advising anybody to do this at all. But you really have to be super careful about who you pick and choose to listen to, especially if they have a book and that's their whole business. I always salute the people that run actual companies and then just happen to put out a book on the side. But if that's going to be their main business, then have a little bit of caution and definitely check in if they have done what they're teaching or what they're preaching about. So
That's
just a little bit of advice there. So
good
yeah,
point.
so those waters started to get a little bit murky. And then right around that time, I was also having trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. So I took a trip over to a local hemp wellness center here in New York. And I was talking to the owner, just trying to get familiarized with cannabis, with CBD, with hemp, and just trying to figure out and, connect the dots, no pun intended, but
Yeah,
just trying to connect the dots as to how, this interacts with us, from a physiological standpoint. And is this for me, whatever. So I'm having a conversation with the owner, and I would say about 5-10 minutes into my visit, in comes an older gentleman. And he comes in and he's just suffering from really debilitating tremors to the point where he can't open the door. His wife had to open the door for him. He couldn't speak. His wife had to do the talking for him. And she basically was just like a lot of patients are in these situations. She was just like, listen, we're desperate. I mean, even if there are some side effects or whatever the case is, we just want to get him better and we want to get him his life back. And so you could imagine the energy of the room. I just got the chills as I'm telling the story and playing it back in my head. But the energy of the room was just dropped, and everybody was just so sad and just like, wow, like nobody deserves to live a life like this. Um, and so the owner was like, hey, listen, I totally understand. Hang out for 5 to 10 minutes, make yourselves feel comfortable. I have a tincture that I think may help and might help us with this situation. Worst case scenario, it does nothing for you. So if you're cool with it, why don't you just try it out and see how it goes? Hang out for 5 to 10 minutes. We'll see. Um, Dillon, I kid you not, it felt like 2 minutes. It was like 120 seconds. And it just seemed like his tremors were subsiding and subsiding and subsiding to the point where he regained full control of his body for the most part. He was able to talk again. And the best part about this whole story is that the first words that came out of his mouth were, I need the biggest bottle of whatever shit it was you just gave me. And from that moment on, the whole vibe of the room went from that low energy I was talking about, that really sad, just like, oh, like nobody deserves to live like this, to wow, like we did it. Like we made a big impact. When I say we, I was just standing there, but like the whole staff was just like, we did it. Like this is just another day for us and what they do. And so to be able to see that firsthand, not just on a YouTube video or not just on the news or to read it in an article or a blog or something like that, but to witness it firsthand
yeah.
really had that light bulb go off for me. And I was like, okay, I think I'm going to jump ship, and I'm going to try to put the spotlight on people like this store owner that are making an impact in people's lives to this degree. And I want to help put the spotlight on them and shed light on what they're doing, why they're doing it, and how they're doing it. And so from that point on, I basically just hopped on a couple planes, flew around the country, went to different expos, events, conferences, started picking people's brains. And I remember, I think I was coming home from MJ BizCon, and on the plane ride home, I pretty much was just so focused. I figured out the whole business model, the name of the company and everything. And I practically had the website set up. And when I landed back in New York, I was like, okay, it's go time. Like there's no point of return. So that's pretty much the story as to how we got to where we are today.
Listen, I have to say, what a beautiful story too. And I love how everything happens for a reason, right? You happen to walk into that store at that moment. And
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know if you touched on if that was the first experience you had walking into a facility
Mhm.
like that, but if it was, and I'm sure it was for others in that room, tough to recover from that. And if they didn't and if you didn't have the experience and that store owner didn't come out and change this man's life in front of your eyes, you might not be in the position you're in right now. So I love how the whole story comes together. I want to touch on a couple things. If we're working with a delay here and you see me talking over you, that's this Zoom universe we'll have to deal with. I apologize. Secondly, there were so many things you touched on there that I wanted to pick on. First of all, I'm not a reader at all. I cannot, and I've talked about this before on my show, and then obviously to everybody. I can't pick up a book. My only chance is an audio book, and then even then, it's got to be something like maybe Matthew McConaughey talking through his own book and his own life journals. I got through 80% of that. And it's just like such a block. And I want to know if, and this is not prepped, if you have a book that you just absolutely swear by that you recommend to everybody that you would want to share with the audience, just because I'm working on it myself. So do you have one?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's two books that have really made an impact. The first one, if you're looking for something to just kind of like personally in terms of like health, mindset, routines, things like that, Own the Day, Own Your Life by Aubrey Marcus. That is unbelievable. I've recommended that so many times to other entrepreneurs who just kind of feel like they're constantly, on this hamster wheel, and they can just never catch their breath, and they just constantly feel like it's almost like they're a slave to the machine or the business that they've built. So it's like, how do you get out of that cycle, and how do you just come up for air? Right. So that book has been absolutely tremendous in helping me like realign there. Just a lot of good, like, wellness, nutrition, sunlight type of advice. So if anybody's looking for a good read in that category, yeah, man, just get the audiobook too.
Yeah.
The author himself narrates it.
Okay.
And it's a good one if you're just going for like a morning or like end of day stroll or walk or something like that, just to clear your mind. It's a really good one. You can just do like chores around the house and stuff like that. You don't have to be like hunkered down and like super focused. So I think that'll be perfect for you.
You're not kidding, because I've never been hunkered down and super on anything. So I'm happy to hear that it's an audio book, and I will absolutely be checking out, because I'm in that rut right now. And everybody who's talked to me in the last 30 days knows it. I'm like, dude, I've never been more busy, but I do it to myself. I have a hard time saying no. I want to know about everything. And I think you've touched on this on other podcasts, and whether it's your own or somebody else's, curiosity is everything. Like, if you don't have this curiosity to learn more about a stranger's business, then how are you ever going to expand your network? In fact, I talked to somebody the other day who was basically telling me, I was doing some LinkedIn training for them, and she was like, well, I've never networked with anybody, with any new people, with any strangers. She's like, I only, normally keep it with people who I talk to. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I took a second. I'm like, think about what you just said. How
Much.
could you ever grow your network if you're only playing within the field you've already been on? Like, you got to go talk to, and it was almost like a light bulb moment when she caught herself saying it. And it was so interesting. But I wanted to also kind of transition into something else that you did, and that's totally going for it. I mean, the plane ride you talk about, you were back in New York, you had the whole business plan put together. Now, you were in the publishing world. How mentally, and also how do you navigate that leap, saying, you know what, I'm going for it, I'm so passionate, I have no choice? What is that? How do you manifest all that?
I mean, it's just going for it, right? Like, it's what you said, like, and I also, like, I never want people to get it twisted with what I said, where like I had a whole business plan, right? Because when people typically say business plan, they think of this giant binder with like all this stuff. Like, mind you, I had a legal pad and a pen, and I was just scribbling. I was like, anything that comes to mind right now, I'm jotting it down. I'm jotting it down. I'm jotting it down. So that was the quote unquote business plan, right? But you just do. Like, you just gotta do it. And so the transition from having like a publishing mindset coming over into cannabis, it didn't actually require a lot of heavy lifting, because the same framework that I was applying to the experts, the subject matter experts, the thought leaders in publishing, it's the same framework that I applied to all the cannabis leaders that I work with today, right? They all have their own particular niche that's carved out for them, that they've kind of decided to plant their flag and own. And it's my job to really just put a spotlight on them and kind of extrapolate the creativity, the wisdom, the innovative thinking, the work, and everything that they've accomplished, and put it all together. And now, how do I put that in front of people like editors, reporters, and journalists to garner media attention and put a spotlight on them? So the mechanics of what I'm doing on a daily basis is really no different. And I take the same mindset and framework to what I was doing before to what I'm doing today. It's just that now we're playing in cannabis, which is a little bit more for some, and I think you and I could probably agree, probably a little bit more interesting because of
Oh yeah.
all the nuances and how it's a nascent industry. So that's really the only difference. But just got to do it. Just got to jump and commit.
Well, I think I would love to transition, and that was such a beautiful setup to talk a little bit more specifically about PR. But I'm just sitting here and I'm hung up, and I have to ask you, what is the conversation you have with your former employer? Like, hey, I'm going to go start my own business. And then also, like, how do you manage that conversation? And then what resources do you have? Did you just start from zero, and did you do the daily grind and clawed your way back up? Like, did you have to experience all that, or did you kind of fall into some great timing?
I think the right preparation and hard work will always meet opportunity at the right time. So that's how I elaborate on your comment when you said if it was perfect timing. So I think there was definitely, in that recipe, I think timing was definitely there.
Sure.
But to answer your first question, relationship capital to me is worth so much more than a check.
Yeah.
It may sound cliche, it may not, but at the end of the day, you know, having a network of a million good people
Yeah.
is worth so much more than having $1 million just sitting in your bank account just for the sake of sitting in your bank account. And I think, you preach this all the time. But it's just the way it is. And so what I was able to do was just navigate that situation and very openly say, listen, I'm not competition. I'm not somebody who wants to come in and swoop everything that you've done over the last decade and take it from you and go do my own thing over here. It was just, a simple conversation. Hey, listen, this is how I feel. This is the truth. This is my situation. This is what I want to do. I've learned so much from you. And to this day, I mean, we still talk, we still collaborate from time to time, and it's just a really good relationship. And I think not burning bridges is one of the most important things that people need to realize. Even if you think, oh, I'm never going to need you again or whatever, like, you never want to burn bridges. You never want to leave a bad taste in anybody's mouth. So um, just doing things with respect and knowing that, we're all in this to help others, and obviously, to make money, because you need a place to live. You got to put
Yeah.
food on the table. So I think just being open-minded and having respect for the people that you work with is the best way to go about any kind of transition like that.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic. And I think you talked to how much the network really means, right? Like, this whole time while you were manifesting this business plan and this new career for yourself, you were out building genuine relationships. You were doing favors for the right people. And I love that you said your comparison of, I'd rather have 1 million people versus $1 million, but you stopped yourself and you said 1 million good people, because
Yeah.
there's a really big difference between having a network of 1 million people, right? Maybe what you can associate with 1 million followers. Just because you have 1 million followers doesn't mean they're all out doing the right thing for you.
Right.
But 1 million people in your network who you understand and who understand you and can move together and put pieces of the puzzle. I mean, that's what it's all about, man. And you said something else too. It's like, you have to start from zero. So how else are you going to do that if everybody who's been doing what you wanted to do, they see you as competition? You're screwed from day one. So you have to come out and say, hey, listen, rather than competition, let's work together. What are you doing that I can't do, and vice versa, and help each other, like Green Lane Communications and what I've been able to do here as a sub brand of my agency with Canna Advertising. Anybody who doesn't know might quickly say, well, these two guys are competition here. Whereas Mike and I are like, no, we're going to really help each other here. Whatever you can do, I can't, and vice versa. So I think sets up for a good transition into this. So I'm newer, I'm way more new to advertising and PR than you are. I'm a baby. I joined this game back in October, and I jokingly say when I took this VP of sales role that I could hardly define PR when I took that role. And I still say that. I still think it's hard to define it. So I'm a quick learner, and I'm starting to connect the dots. But this is just a crazy industry with endless competition. So I have to know, and I want you to tell our audience something about public relations that I don't know, isn't talked about enough, that isn't valued enough? Something about PR that you'd like more people to know and understand.
Yeah, I think so. Here's an interesting thing, and this is not going to be, it's not going to be a sexy answer, and I think a lot of people are going to be like deflated after they hear this. Um, so when you think of PR, you think of, you know, like the front cover of the magazine, or like the article, or the write up, or the interview, the cute, like all that kind of stuff, right? And that is a component of PR. But if you take a look at all of those things, right, jumping on somebody's podcast, being in a magazine, going on TV, all this stuff, appearing at an event and speaking, the common denominator there is relationship building, right? I mean, somebody had to get to know you to some extent before that bridge was built,
Yeah.
right? So the way I look at it is, at its core, PR is relationship building, it's networking, it's having a give first mentality. And I really like, the same way a musician or an artist has a manager, and their manager just connects them with different venues,
Yeah.
different, like all that stuff. It works the same exact way. So when it comes to PR, you really have to look at it as, okay, it's public relationships. Like, and it's not always going to be about you. It's going to be about, especially in the beginning, when you don't necessarily have, you know, a rock star lineup to represent, you just have to start thinking, okay, you know, who can I connect to who? And you're a great example of that, because that's something you do on a daily basis. And you and I
Right.
talk about this all the time. There are plenty of times where there's nothing in it for you. And you'll call me up and you'll be like, Mike, you need to talk to so-and-so. And I'm just like, okay, cool. And I can get off the phone with you, and 5 minutes later, I'm like, well, you know what? I'm like, there's really nothing. Like, I appreciate Dillon doing that, but there's really nothing in this for me. However, if I talk to this person, I have a funny feeling I can introduce them to so and so, and I think there could be a good bond there. So let me talk to them anyway, and let's see if we can make that happen and benefit them. So, at its core, to make a long story short, PR is all about networking, it's all about relationships, and it's all about connecting the dots and facilitating win-win relationships for everybody involved.
Well, I don't know anybody who's going to be deflated by that answer, Mike, as you allured to before answering it. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head. And I appreciate you saying those things. And I don't know, man, that's the root of everything here, relations with the public, right? I'm going to repeat this into oblivion, but I don't mind doing it. There's a reason Gary V, everybody says, oh, Gary V is repetitive. I said, listen to what he's saying. It does make sense. And for me, one of those things that I can't stop repeating is, I realized early in this pandemic, after just a couple months of this connecting,
Yeah,
that if I can make best friends for a living and help people for a living, you'll have everything you've ever wanted in return. Now, not immediately, not right away. You have to be
definitely not.
big picture, and you got to skate through all of the not great people, which, depending on how your outlook is on people, it's definitely a little different here in the Northeast. I'm in Jersey. I know you're in Long Island, right?
Yeah.
Listen, you have to, you don't start off assuming people are fantastic. I don't care what you say. But you nailed it, man. Before we dive into a little bit more on the cannabis space, I wanted to ask you something we do on every show, some rapid fire questions, just to strip the
Cool.
layers back on Mike Mejer here a little bit. And I'm going to get you started with an easy one. Favorite music artist or band?
I would say right now, Burner. He's also the founder of the Cookies brand, which a lot of people
Nice.
are familiar with. So I
Yeah.
would say right now, Burner.
Okay. So for those who aren't familiar, what type of music is that?
He's a hip hop artist. He's from the
Okay.
Bay. He's from San Francisco. And he just has that, I don't know. He's got that wiggle. You know what I mean? The,
Hey, I'm all about the wiggle,
in,
dude.
in the,
Uh,
yeah. So that's that.
Fantastic. All right, we're gonna do this one a little bit more cannabis related. What's your go-to? We'll call it munchies snack. But what's your favorite snack?
Two, Skittles. And also there's a fruit called a blood orange. I just got put onto recently. It's the combination between a regular orange and a grapefruit.
Oh,
Unbelievable. So if you like fruit or you like just like citrus in general, check it out.
blood orange. All right,
Blood
deal.
orange.
Just because I feel as if I don't know if I've mentioned this. My favorite snack, EL fudge cookies, the Keebler Elves. I don't know if you know the double stuffed, because if they're not double stuffed, I don't want anything
What
to
are
do
you
with
doing? Yeah.
But anyway, all right, best pizza. Now, you're from Long Island. I don't know if you want
Bleecker
to say
Street
pizza
pizza.
on the island or wherever else, but what's the best slice of pizza you've ever had?
Bleecker Street pizza.
Oh, okay.
Downtown.
So that's very popular in the barstool scene. And Dave Portnoy, I think Bleecker Street got like a
Oh,
nine
really?
point something on the Dave's reviews.
Wow. Okay, cool.
I've never had it, but that is a very popular pizza joint.
Okay, cool.
So
Didn't
you
know that.
nailed it. Two more. Coolest person you've ever met. Now that could be a celebrity. It could just
Snoop
be,
Dogg.
whoa, you've met Snoop.
I met him at VP Retail Records. It's a record store in Jamaica, Queens. That was a pretty cool moment.
Yeah, I would have to say. I'll hear more about that story offline. One thing on your bucket list. Last question.
Oh man. I love to, like, personally, I love to travel. So one thing on my bucket list is to spend a month in Bali.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Well, listen, let me know when you're heading that way. I'll see if I can hop on the plane. I think I need to get that on my bucket list. Um, cool, man. Thanks for participating. I like doing that. I think it gives people a little bit of a break and also a better idea who you are. So back to the cannabis space, right? Of course, one of the hottest industries right now, especially kind of in our markets, right? New Jersey, New York, two of the latest
Sure.
states to legalize recreationally. And if New York lives up to expectations of any other business and industry, it's going to just be insane. So, what I wanted to know is, obviously everybody's looking for a way to get their brand out there in
Mhm.
cannabis, right? Everybody's starting from scratch essentially, unless you're coming from the medical side, which you were approved to do, but now are also doing recreational, which is a totally different message anyway. So with with all the different types of media, I know obviously you're more on the earned media side of things, that can get tricky, right, in the cannabis space. So, with endless media platforms nowadays, how do you suggest a cannabis brand get started on the marketing side of things for PR? Where do you even begin?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think every brand is different, right? Because some brands deliberately want to have a face behind the brand.
Yeah,
And so if that's the case, I would say, again, no two people are alike. So I would say if you're gonna go that route, definitely go the earned media route and just put yourself out there as much as possible, because people want to buy from people, especially in cannabis.
yeah,
And by no means, when I say what I'm about to say, do I mean that, big MSOs or like corporate companies are bad by any means. I don't think that at all. Um, but not everybody wants to buy from a big massive corporation like a Walmart type of
right.
operation. A lot of folks want to buy from more boutique brands, and so if that's the case, put yourself out there, let it be known, let people know who you are, what you do, why you do it. Otherwise, I would say collaboration is key. I mean, you can never really go at a lofty goal alone, and that goes for anything in cannabis, whether you're in New York, New Jersey, or any other market or anything you're trying to do in the space. But bringing in the right people and partnering with the right people is going to be key. It really is,
Absolutely.
because no one person has this game figured out. And if it looks like one person has this game figured out, there's a really good chance that under the hood, they've got an entire spider web of connections and relationships and things like that. So that's just something to keep in mind always.
I think that also I'm going to listen to this episode back and I'm going to say, wow, what a great transition for but you're nailing the transition.
That's so
Um,
funny. And that
so,
was not planned at all.
as a connector in the cannabis space myself, right? You said something, collaboration is key. I've noticed that in the cannabis industry, and I've told this to everybody and I've collected their opinions, and I think, for the most part, people agree, and I want to get your take on it. Um, I think everybody in the industry is all about helping each other, right? It's a very good moral industry. Everybody says, how can we help? I'd love to do this. Let's partner up. But nobody has the time, right? They're running a cannabis business, whether that's
Mm,
good, bad, ugly, whatever it is, they're running a cannabis business. They're
right.
so hands-on, they're so working overtime, they have no social life. Like they can't build the genuine relationships that they're needing to build, whether that be with their maybe strategic partners, maybe buyers or clients or prospects, whatever that may be. It seems like the industry is in need of a hub and just better communication. So, having worked with brands from all different sizes throughout all different verticals in the cannabis space, I want to know from your point of view, what's a common mistake that brands make along the way here, whether that's maybe a newer brand starting or an established one who gets tripped up. What's a mistake that you see cannabis brands make, and how can they solve for it, or maybe try to avoid it moving forward?
That's a great question. And the mistake they make is exactly what you just described. So thinking that building relationships and building bridges and creating strategic alliances, like it's one thing, like it's kind of like it's like when an organization or a business needs to generate money or revenue, right? Like it's one thing to acquire a customer, but then it's a totally different thing to keep that customer. And it's harder to keep the customer, but the cost to keep the customer is going to be much less than if you're constantly trying to go out and bring new customers in. And so to answer that question, I mean, that's the framework for why I'm about to say what I'm about to say, but it's just because there's no dollar amount that appears in your bank account after a particular phone call, 9 times out of 10, if you trust your gut and something feels good about a particular relationship, whether it's, and I'm not even just talking PR, but like if you're talking, it could be the editor of a magazine, or it could be a potential distribution partner, or it could be your a potential cultivator, because you're thinking 5 years down the road and
Right.
you know that you want to get into flower or whatever it may be, right? So the mistake they're making is just because a dollar amount does not appear in the bank account as soon as you hang up the phone, it doesn't mean that your time is being wasted. Now, I totally get when you're tight on time, you're on a budget, and you have to allocate accordingly, but that time spent on relationship capital should not be pushed back.
Right.
And if it is, at least make sure that you get 5 minutes a day, just 5 to 20 minutes a day. Just send out a couple messages, just check in with people, just see how they're doing, see if they need a hand, see if there's anything that you could do for them. And if they don't respond, totally fine. If they respond back and say, hey, there's nothing that we really need right now, but thanks for checking in, it's more valuable than you can ever imagine. So again, I'm just putting a very, very big emphasis on relationship capital, because you never know when the VP of sales is going to end up as the director of distribution. Um,
Totally.
so relationship capital is huge in my opinion.
It's everything, and I think acting as a hub, right? As somebody who's, I'm trying to build sweat equity in the cannabis space. As a kid who's never, I say kid, I'm this 26-year-old kid trying to figure it out. I just like to see it that way. But in cannabis, I'm a rookie, right? But people who can build a genuine enough relationship with me as who I am as a person, regardless of my experience in cannabis,
Mhm.
and they can understand really what I'm able to do it for them, and not only able to do, but I want to do for them. Once
Totally.
they realize that, um, you know, they want to open up, and you start hearing everything about their passions and their business. And then you're like, okay, I have information here. Now I can actually connect you. So it's so funny to maybe put this into a real life example. I network with an individual who is trying to raise some capital in New Jersey in the cannabis space, and has a great foundation, an awesome goal in mind. And he wants to get with Al Harrington, former NBA player who's in the
Very
space
cool.
with Viola. And I'm like, man, I will do what I can. I'll let you know as soon as I get in touch with him. And
Yeah.
I didn't say if, I just said when. And I knew it would happen eventually. And I'm on the most unsuspecting phone call yesterday with another referral in the sports and entertainment space, not even, anything realistic. And guess what? They know him and they made the connection. And I'm like, I called my guy Brendan. I'm like, dude, I'm gonna get you Al. We're gonna talk. This is gonna be awesome. And just, Brendan had no reason to really put his eggs in my basket other than to, hey, let's just talk, see what he can do. And now, although on paper, there's no trace of Brendan and I with his cannabis business, there's nothing, but I was a very integral part in getting an introduction that he otherwise could not have gotten.
Right.
So I live for that stuff, and it speaks to your answers so well. Here's a couple things I wanted to hit on as well. Cannabis industry, of course, one of the fastest moving industries, as we're already touching on. There's no downtime. It seems like a new state legalizes recreational use of cannabis every couple weeks. I think Virginia now. So for somebody like yourself, Mike, who's been established in the space and really has a pulse on the industry, where do you see the future for cannabis? And I guess if you could try to answer that, I know I'm killer with the two-part questions, but where do you see the future for cannabis for consumers as well as business? If you can kind of separate the two.
Yeah, I think well, I think sooner rather than later we're going to see banking open up for cannabis, which is, I think that's just going to open up so many new doors and so many new opportunities. I mean, I think right now, if you're depending on, how close you are to a plant touching operation, I mean, you can't even write off, I don't even think you can write off your electric bill, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, I've heard everything from situations like that. So it makes it very, very difficult to operate and operate for, you know, operate successfully.
Yeah.
So I think as we start to move forward and regulations get to be put in place in favor of plant touching companies, and we start seeing things like that progress and move in the right direction,
Yeah.
I think business wise things are just going to completely explode in the best way. In terms of the consumer, I think I would like, and this could just be my optimistic self, but I think within the next 5 years, we should see federal legalization.
Wow. Okay. So, quick question on that. And for somebody who's, again, newer to the industry, I've heard both sides of that. Whether you want that to happen, the federalization of it, or whether you want to have it operate from state to state. I won't ask you to lean in on that one way or the other, but
Mm.
it's definitely an interesting topic. And yeah, I think you're right. In the next 5 years, we certainly seem to be working toward that. Um, I wanted to touch on something else as well, and that is the events side of it. I come from a big events background in the sports and entertainment space and everything else. And, we're coming out of this pandemic, right? I mean, even up here in the north, in New York, we're starting to see the hope. People are getting vaccinated. Where do you see, especially in the New York and New Jersey market, where do you see events and cannabis falling into line with each other?
I think especially so there's a lot of different things happening, right? I mean, New Jersey, New York, both legalizing, both kind of, on the path of getting everything figured out and whatnot. Combining that the with the current situation with the pandemic and how we're starting to see that light at the end of the tunnel, I definitely see in-person events coming back. Now, what that's going to look like, I really have no clue. I've spoken to a lot of folks in the event space.
Right.
I have both sides of the coin, and both sides of the coin are in my ear, and they're telling me this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and I'm just like, it's such a coin toss right now, in my
Totally.
personal opinion, and I'm very eager to see how it all plays out. But at a very basic level, I think that in-person events are most definitely going to end up coming back, especially in the Northeast. And I think it's inevitable, especially with legalization you know, just taking place here in the
Yeah.
Northeast. It's one of those things it's going to be inevitable, and I don't think it's a matter of how, or no, I don't think it's a matter of if. I think it's just a matter of when and how it's going to be done. But again, the cannabis community and the whole cannabis industry is super innovative and creative in how they go about navigating uncharted territory. And so I have a lot of hope that things are going to work out pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we might share a mutual friend at TerraSend, Diana McElroy.
Oh,
I think she's
Diana's,
been on your show,
she's
and
unbelievable. She's great.
she is, and she's a community outreach specialist for TerraSend of New Jersey. And without people like her who are literally bootstrapping, knocking door to door, trying to
Yeah.
form the opinions and gather, hey, what is the outlook on cannabis in this community? How can we help? How can we change? How can we flip the script here? Right? We're trying to build a business, right? Get us out of this hole we've all been in. So I guess I wanted to ask on the event side of things, and you're totally right. Nobody has any idea what it's going to look like and when, but something I'm so curious to see play out is how cannabis, now with legalization from state to state, is going to try to capture the new user, right? Just like anything
Mm.
else, events, taste testings, wineries, everything. Like, are we going to see cannabis brands actively out in the community trying to get people to test their product? Is that going to be a marketing campaign? Because I don't know if I've seen that very much. And I don't know if there's legality behind it, but do you ever see something like that where you can go to an event and they're saying, hey, smoke this, try it out? Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny that you bring that up because before we got on the show, I was actually looking into that and I was actually researching what that would look like and if that would take form in some way or shape. But I definitely think that's going to be something that will be here because if you think about it, I mean, there's so many different ways to consume cannabis, right? You have flower, which you can smoke. You have edibles. You have beverages. They're like the sky's the limit, right? And
yeah,
who knows what we're going to come up with, um, over the next 3 to 5 years or so. And I think by then, a lot of the gray area that we're not sure about legally, like, okay, are we allowed to, like, we're allowed to sell here, but nobody can consume here. We can do that in this state, but we can't do it in this state. I think over time, just as it's happened with alcohol, I think things will just start to work themselves out. And over time, I think we're for sure going to see things like how you go to a winery and you get dressed up and you go taste 5, 6, 7, 8,
yeah,
9 different wines, and then you say, oh, you know what, I want to take this bottle with me home. So you may end up going to, I don't know, a cultivation facility or a farm, whatever it may be, and you might be sampling different strains, or you may be taking different edibles, and then maybe there's going to be things like cannabis and food pairings, which are already taking place. But I
oh
think
yeah,
things like that are just going to be a lot more prominent and a lot more talked about. Um, and so I'm very, very excited for that because I think a lot of cannabis, or an important piece of cannabis, is the experience, because somebody
totally.
could have a bad, and this ties into your question about new users. If new users have bad experiences, or if they still kind of feel like, oh wow, this is something that's frowned upon even though it's legal, but it's not like, as soon as they could just feel comfortable about it, they're going to have an unbelievable experience. And I think it's really going to start um, shifting the paradigm, and also changing the stigma that's been around for so long. So I think events are going to be key to making a lot of progress in cannabis.
Totally. And I think we're going to see it in a lot of these private events too. There's this one guy on Instagram, and I don't, maybe this is my innocent ask to see if I can get in touch with him live on my show here. His Instagram is Pizza Pusha. He does private events in New York, I believe, with surrounded by cannabis, and it's this huge social event, and it's a private dining experience. And I think we're going to see a lot of that, and that's going to be pretty insane. And you mentioned, of course, there's a million other ways to consume cannabis rather than just smoking it. I was out on my honeymoon with my wife last year. Quick side story, and we were out in California, first time out there, and we got one of those drinks that you're referring to, which of course tastes fantastic, really citrusy, limey. Maybe it had blood orange in it. I don't know.
Yeah.
But um, don't chug those, and it split them with your partner, because I ended up at dinner that night and I was just like, okay, I've never experienced this before. That's quite different.
You did split it or you didn't split it?
We split it. There was a third of it left, and I left the car in a hot parking garage in West Hollywood. I said, I'm not going to leave this here. And I
Right.
just,
Right.
kind of finished it. And yeah, I was seeing stars in Hollywood, that's for sure. It was crazy.
That's
Um,
funny.
but no, anyway, so thanks for your point of view on that as well. Again, nailing it. I think we're kind of coming toward the end of our show here, and I want to touch on PR not being enough, right?
Hmm.
Like, as somebody who's running a PR agency yourself, and for somebody like me who's with an agency who does it as well, it's not enough. You have to, and I think so many people, both in business and maybe just the consumer side, they lump advertising and PR in together.
All the time.
Touch on that a little bit and why you either hate that, or I know you hate that.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, there's no Swiss Army knife, so to say, that's just going to get you ultimate success right away overnight. And I always like to say too, if I'm working with somebody and we get a big media hit, if they end up on the front cover of a magazine, uh, the journey just starts there. A lot of people think, oh, that's it. We just did it. No,
No.
this is just the beginning. So alluding back to what was going on in my publishing days, that's just the start. You want to take that asset, because that's an asset now. You want to take that and you want to incorporate that into your sales material, your marketing material. And you want to keep using that, right? You want to put that on your website. If there's a product that got featured or reviewed in a respectable publication, maybe put that on your product page so that when visitors go to your website and they're having second doubts, or maybe they're not completely sold on it, wow, all of a sudden there's a publication that they read all the time and your product was featured there. So there's a lot of ways to incorporate the earned media hits that you can get from a campaign like that into your day-to-day operations. I mean, you can do everything with newsletters, social media posts. There's just so many different ways to go about it. So I always like to say sometimes the tail end of a publicity campaign is really just the start
Yeah.
of so many doors opening up for you. And so
Right.
you should never just do the interview and then let it be. That's really just the start of a brand new journey.
That's the start of the race.
Yeah.
I had it written down. I said, you get on the cover of Rolling Stone magazine and you think, wow, that's it. Let's celebrate. We made it to the finish line. No, that's the starting point.
Yeah.
That's getting on the cover of Rolling Stone was you training for the last 3 years before your marathon and stretching and doing. That's the work you put into it. Now the journey starts. It's really, really well said. So I don't know what else I could possibly ask you, because I think you've touched on just about everything. But something I like to ask a lot of my guests on the show is, who are you looking to connect with next?
Great question. And it's so funny. I think you and I both ask each other that before we get off the phone, anytime we talk.
Yes.
And it kind of always ebbs and flows, but anybody who, and this is kind of, a little shameless plug, but anybody who's looking to just get their name out there, if you just kind of feel like, okay, we've done the work, we've got the data to back up why we're so unique or why we're so significant, why what we're doing is so critical to the cannabis movement, community, to the plant, feel free to reach out. I'm always more than happy just to chat about your current situation, where do you take things next. So people that are just looking to get their name out there, I'm always happy to connect with those folks. And other than that, if you just know interesting people, I mean, that's why I love PR, because I have to dive into everybody's story. Very similar to what you do on your show and what I do on my show. I just love talking to really interesting people who are making a big difference, just like that store owner. So anybody like that just wants to share their story and see, if there's anything that we can do and move it forward. I'm always happy to connect with folks like that. I'm easy to reach on LinkedIn. greenlanecommunication.com. That's the company website. And if you want to email me directly, it's just mike@greenlanecommunication.com.
Make it real easy for them. And just in your last 30 seconds of wrapping up there, and not a shameless plug at all, that's what we're doing here. I already have rethought of maybe 3 or 4 other people who I need to introduce you to. So we'll talk. Lastly, Mike, what's your message for the world, man? I know that's really big picture, but we've done a lot of that here on this episode. What's your message to everybody?
Just be kind, especially right now. I think just be kind and just do what you have to do. Handle your business and be kind, and just keep it moving forward. That's it. Just keep going.
Well, I don't know if I could have put it better myself. Mike, thanks so much for being on the show. I think you have shed such a positive light on the cannabis space as well as the PR space. Uh, Thanks a ton, man. Really appreciate everything. And I know this won't be the last time we're in the same podcast universe. So looking forward to the journey, man. Thanks so much.
Likewise, Dillon. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to keep this going.
Connect with Mike on LinkedIn and find out more about Green Lane Communication at greenlanecommunication.com.